Chapter 20. By the time Firepaw returned, the camp was starting to look a little better. Parties of cats had clearly been patching and repairing continuously throughout the day. Frostfur and Goldenflower were still busy fortifying the nursery walls, but the outer wall looked solid and secure once more. Firepaw trotted across the clearing to see if there was any fresh kill around. He passed Sandpaw and Dustpaw, who were preparing to leave in the next patrol. "Sorry," mewed Sandpaw, as Firepaw sniffed hopefully around the eating area. "We ate the last 2 mice." Firepaw shrugged. He would catch something for himself later. He headed back to the apprentice's den, where Graypaw was sitting with his back resting against the tree stump, licking a forepaw. "Where's Ravenpaw?" Firepaw asked as he sat down. "Not back from his task yet," replied Graypaw. "Look at that!" He held out his paw for Firepaw to inspect. The pad was torn and bleeding. "Tigerclaw sent me fishing, and I stepped on a sharp stone in the stream. That looks pretty deep. You should get Spottedleaf to take a look at it," Firepaw advised. "Where did Tigerclaw send Ravenpaw, by the way?" "Dunno. I was up to my belly in cold water," muttered Graypaw. He stood up and limped away toward Spottedleaf's den. Firepaw settled down, his eyes fixed on the entrance to the camp, and waited for Ravenpaw. After overhearing the warriors' conversation last night, he couldn't shake the feeling that something dreadful was going to happen to his friend. His heart lurched as he saw Tigerclaw enter the camp alone. He waited longer. The moon was high in the sky. Surely Ravenpaw should be back by now. Firepaw found himself wishing he'd spoken to Bluestar when he'd had the chance. He could see Darkstripe and Longtail guarding her den now, and he certainly didn't want them to overhear his concerns. Tigerclaw had brought back fresh kill, which he was sharing with Whitestorm outside the warrior's den. Firepaw realized he was very hungry. Perhaps he should go and hunt. He might come across Ravenpaw outside the camp. As he wondered what to do, Firepaw saw Ravenpaw trotting through the entrance of the camp. A thrill of relief raced through him, and not just because Ravenpaw was holding fresh kill between his teeth. The apprentice came straight over to Firepaw and dropped the mouthful of food on the ground. "Enough for all 3 of us," he mewed proudly. "And it should taste extra good. It's from ShadowClan territory." Firepaw gasped. "You hunted in ShadowClan territory?" "That was my task," Ravenpaw explained. "Tigerclaw sent you into enemy territory to hunt." Firepaw could hardly believe it. "We must tell Bluestar. That was too dangerous." At the mention of Bluestar's name, Ravenpaw shook his head. His eyes looked haunted and shadowed with fear. "Look, just keep quiet, okay?" he hissed. "I survived. I even caught some prey. That's all there is to it." "You survived this time," Firepaw spat. "Shh! Tigerclaw's looking. Just eat your share and keep quiet," snapped Ravenpaw. Firepaw shrugged and took a piece of the fresh kill. Ravenpaw ate quickly, avoiding Firepaw's eye. "Shall we save some for Graypaw?" he asked after a while. "He went to see Spottedleaf," Firepaw mumbled through a mouthful. "He cut his paw. I don't know when he'll be back." "Well, save him whatever you want," replied Ravenpaw, suddenly sounding worn out. "I'm tired. I need to sleep." He stood up and pushed his way into the den. Firepaw stayed outside, watching the rest of the camp prepare for the night. He was going to have to tell Ravenpaw what he'd overheard in the forest last night. He needed to know just how much danger he was in. Tigerclaw was lying beside Whitestorm, sharing tongues, but with one eye fixed on the apprentice's den. Firepaw yawned to show Tigerclaw how exhausted he was. Then he got to his paws and followed Ravenpaw inside. Ravenpaw was asleep, but Firepaw could tell from his twitching paws and whiskers that he was dreaming. He knew it wasn't a good dream by the tiny mewls and squeaks that Ravenpaw was making. Suddenly, the black cat leaped to his paws, his eyes stretched wide in terror. His fur was standing on end, and his back was arched. "Ravenpaw!" Firepaw meowed in alarm. "Calm down! You're in our den! There's only me here!" Ravenpaw looked around wildly. "It's just me," Firepaw repeated. Ravenpaw blinked and seemed to recognize his friend. He collapsed onto his bed. "Ravenpaw," mewed Firepaw seriously. "There's something you need to know. Something I heard last night when I was out looking for the wild garlic." Ravenpaw looked away, still trembling from his dream, but Firepaw persisted. "Ravenpaw, I heard Tigerclaw telling Darkstripe and Longtail that you betrayed ThunderClan. He told them you slipped away during the trip to Mothermouth and told ShadowClan that the camp was unguarded." Ravenpaw spun round to face Firepaw. "But I didn't!" he exclaimed, horrified. "Of course you didn't," Firepaw agreed. "But Darkstripe and Longtail believe you did, and Tigerclaw persuaded them that they should get rid of you." Ravenpaw was speechless, his breath coming in gasps. "Why would Tigerclaw want to get rid of you, Ravenpaw?" Firepaw asked gently. "He's one of the clan's strongest warriors. What threat are you to him?" Firepaw suspected he already knew the answer, but he wanted to hear the truth from Ravenpaw's own mouth. He waited while Ravenpaw fumbled for words. At last, the Black Apprentice crawled closer to Firepaw and whispered hoarsely into his ear. "Because the River Clan deputy didn't kill Redtail. Tigerclaw did." Firepaw nodded silently, and Ravenpaw continued, his whisper cracking with tension. "Redtail killed the River Clan deputy, so Tigerclaw didn't kill Oakheart." Firepaw couldn't help interrupting. Ravenpaw shook his head. "No, he didn't. After Redtail had killed Oakheart, Tigerclaw ordered me back to the camp. I wanted to stay, but he yowled at me to go, so I ran into the trees. I should have carried on running, but I couldn't leave while they were still fighting. I turned and crept back to see if Tigerclaw needed help. By the time I got near, all the River Clan warriors had fled, leaving just Redtail and Tigerclaw. Redtail was watching the last warrior running away, and Tigerclaw—" Ravenpaw paused, then gulped. "Tigerclaw jumped on him. He sank his teeth into the back of his neck, and Redtail fell to the ground, dead. That's when I ran. I don't know if Tigerclaw saw me or not. I just kept running till I got back to the camp." "Why didn't you tell Bluestar?" Firepaw pressed gently. "Would she have believed me?" Ravenpaw's eyes rolled wildly. "Do you believe me?" "Of course I do," Firepaw mewed. He licked Ravenpaw between the ears in an effort to calm and comfort his friend. He was going to have to find another opportunity to tell Bluestar about Tigerclaw's treachery. "Don't worry, I'll sort it out," he promised. "Meanwhile, make sure you stick close to me or Graypaw." "Does Graypaw know about them wanting to get rid of me?" "Not yet, but I'll have to tell him." Ravenpaw settled silently onto his belly and stared ahead. "It's okay, Ravenpaw," Firepaw purred, touching the skinny black body with his nose. "I'll help you get out of this." Graypaw padded into the den at dawn. Sandpaw and Dustpaw had returned from their patrol a while ago, and were asleep in their nests. "Hi!" mewed Graypaw, sounding more cheerful than he had for days. Firepaw woke at once. "You sound better," he purred. Graypaw licked Firepaw's ear. "Spotted Leaf put some gunk on my cut and made me lie still for hours. I must have fallen asleep. By the way, I hope that chaffinch out there was for me. I was starving." "It was. Ravenpaw caught it yesterday. Tigerclaw sent him into—" "Shut up, you two," growled Sandpaw. "Some of us are trying to sleep." Graypaw rolled his eyes. "Come on, Firepaw," he mewed. "Brindleface has had her kits. Let's go and visit them." Firepaw purred with pleasure. At last, something for ThunderClan to celebrate. He looked down at Ravenpaw, who was still sleeping, and padded out of the den. With Graypaw, he trotted across the clearing toward the nursery. The rising sun made his pelt glow with warmth, and he stretched appreciatively, reveling in the suppleness of his spine and the strength in his legs. "Stop showing off!" Graypaw called over his shoulder. Firepaw stopped stretching and bounded after his friend. Whitestorm was sitting outside the nursery, guarding the entrance. "Have you two come to see the new kits?" he meowed as Firepaw and Graypaw approached. Firepaw nodded. "One at a time only, and you'll have to wait. Bluestar's with her now," Whitestorm told them. "Well, you can go first," Firepaw offered. "I'll go and see Yellowfang while I'm waiting." He dipped his head respectfully to Whitestorm and headed off toward Yellowfang's nest. The old cat was washing behind her ears, her eyes half closed with concentration. "Don't tell me you're expecting rain," Firepaw teased. Yellowfang looked up. "You've been listening to too many elders' tales," she meowed. "What would be the point of a cat washing its ears if they're only going to get rained on anyway?" Firepaw's whiskers twitched with amusement. "Are you going to see Brindleface's new litter?" he asked. Yellowfang stiffened, and she shook her head. "I don't think I'd be very welcome," she growled. "But they know you saved—" Firepaw began. "A she-cat is very protective of her newborns, especially when it's her first litter. I think I'll stay away," Yellowfang replied in a tone that invited no argument. "As you wish, but I'm going to see them. It must be a good sign, having new kits in the camp. Yellowfang shrugged. Sometimes, she muttered darkly. Firepaw turned and trotted back to the nursery. Clouds had covered the sun, making the air turn fresher. A fierce breeze tugged at his fur and rustled the leaves around the clearing. Bluestar was sitting outside the nursery. Behind her, Graypaw's tail was just disappearing into the narrow entrance. Firepaw, she greeted him. Have you come to see ThunderClan's newest warriors? The ThunderClan leader sounded tired and sad. Firepaw was surprised. Surely the kits were good news for ThunderClan. Yes, I have, he replied. Well, when you've finished, come and see me in my den. Yes, Bluestar. Firepaw mewed as she walked slowly away. He felt his fur prickle. Here was another chance to speak to Bluestar alone. Perhaps StarClan was on his side after all. Graypaw crawled out of the nursery entrance. They're really cute, he mewed, but I'm starving now. I'm off to find some fresh kill. I'll save some for you if I find any. He blinked affectionately at Firepaw and bounded away. Firepaw purred a goodbye and looked up at Whitestorm, who nodded his permission for him to enter the nursery. Firepaw squeezed through the tiny entrance. 4 tiny kits huddled warmly in Brindleface's deeply lined nest. Their fur was pale gray with darker flecks, just like their mother, except for one tiny dark gray tom. They mewled and squirmed beside Brindleface's belly, their eyes shut tight. How are you feeling? Firepaw whispered to her. A little tired, answered Brindleface. She looked down proudly at her litter. But the kits are all strong and healthy. ThunderClan is lucky to have them, Firepaw purred. I was just talking about them to Yellowfang. Brindleface didn't answer, and Firepaw couldn't miss the look of worry that flashed in her eyes as she nudged a straying kit closer to her. Firepaw felt a tremor of anxiety in his belly. Bluestar may have accepted Yellowfang into ThunderClan, but it looked like the old cat was still not trusted by all of the clan. He touched his nose affectionately to Brindleface's flank, then turned and made his way out into the clearing. The clan leader was waiting for Firepaw at the entrance to her den. Longtail sat at her side. The pale tabby warrior stared hard at Firepaw as he approached. Firepaw ignored his gaze and looked expectantly at Bluestar. Come inside, she meowed, turning to lead the way. Firepaw trotted after her. Longtail immediately stood up as if to follow them. Bluestar looked back at him over her shoulder. I think I'll be safe enough with young Firepaw, she meowed. Longtail looked uncertain for a moment, then sat down again outside the entrance. Firepaw had never been inside Bluestar's den. He padded after her through the lichen that draped its entrance. Brindleface's kits are lovely, he purred. Bluestar looked serious. Lovely they may be, but they mean more mouths to feed, and the season of leaf bear will soon be here. Then she glanced at Firepaw, who was unable to hide his surprise at her melancholy tone. Oh, don't listen to me, meowed Bluestar, shaking her head impatiently. The first cold wind always worries me. Come, make yourself comfortable. She tipped her head toward the dry, sandy floor. Firepaw dropped onto his belly and stretched his paws out in front of him. Bluestar circled slowly on her mossy nest. I'm still aching from our training session yesterday, she admitted when she had finally settled herself and curled her tail around her paws. You fought well, young one. For once, Firepaw didn't stop to bask in her praise. His heart was thumping. This was the perfect moment to tell his leader his fears about Tigerclaw. He lifted his chin, ready to speak. But it was Bluestar who spoke first, staring past him at the far wall of her den. I can still smell the stale stench of ShadowClan in the camp, she murmured. I hoped never to see the day when our enemy broke into the heart of ThunderClan. Firepaw nodded in silent agreement, sensing Bluestar was going to say more. And so many deaths, she sighed. First Redtail, then Lionheart. I thank StarClan at least the warriors we have left are strong and loyal like them. At least with Tigerclaw as deputy, ThunderClan may still be able to defend itself. Firepaw's heart plummeted, and an icy chill cut deep into him as Bluestar went on. There was a time when Tigerclaw was a young warrior that I feared for the strength of his passion. Such energy can need careful channeling, but now I am proud to see how much respect the clan has for him. I know he is ambitious, but his ambition makes him one of the bravest cats I have ever had the honor to fight alongside. Firepaw knew at once that he could not tell Bluestar his suspicions about Tigerclaw. Not when Bluestar looked to her deputy to protect the whole clan. He would have to save Ravenpaw himself. He took a deep breath and blinked slowly, so that when Bluestar turned and looked directly into his eyes, no trace of his shock and disappointment remained. Her next words were quiet and full of concern. You know Broken Star will return. He made it clear at the gathering that he wants hunting rights in all the territories. We fought him off once. We can do it again, Firepaw insisted. That's true, Bluestar acknowledged with a wry nod. StarClan will honor your courage, young Firepaw. She paused and licked a healing wound on her side. I think you ought to know that, in the battle with the rats, it was not my 5th life that I lost, but my 7th. Firepaw sat bolt upright, shocked. Bluestar went on. I have let the clan believe it was my 5th, because I don't want them to fear for my safety. But 2 more lives, and I will have to leave you to join StarClan. Firepaw's mind was racing. Why was she telling him this? Thank you for sharing this with me, Bluestar, he purred respectfully. Bluestar nodded. I am tired now, she rasped. Off you go. And Firepaw, I don't expect you to repeat this conversation to anyone. Of course, Bluestar, Firepaw replied, as he nosed his way out through the curtain of lichen. Longtail was still sitting by the entrance. Firepaw stepped past him and made his way toward his den. He didn't know which part of his conversation with Bluestar had been more bewildering. He was stopped in his tracks by a yowl of horror coming from the nursery. Frostfur came sprinting into the clearing, her tail bristling and her eyes wide with alarm. My kits! Someone has taken my kits! Tigerclaw bounded over to her. He called to the clan. Quick! Search the camp! Whitestorm, stay where you are! Warriors, patrol the camp boundary! Apprentices, search every den! Firepaw rushed to the nearest den, the warriors, and pushed his way inside. It was empty. He scrabbled through the bedding with his paws, but there was neither sight nor scent of Frostfur's kits. He charged outside and headed for his own den. Ravenpaw and Greypaw were already inside, pushing aside their nests, sniffing every corner. Dustpaw and Sandpaw were searching the Elder's den. Firepaw left them to it and charged from one clump of grass to another, pushing his muzzle into them, ignoring the nettles that stung his nose. There was no sign of the kits anywhere. He looked around the camp boundary. Warriors paced backward and forward, urgently sniffing the air. Suddenly, Firepaw spotted Yellowfang in the distance. She was pushing her way through an unguarded part of fern wall. She must have found a scent, he thought, and raced toward her as her tail disappeared into the greenery. By the time he arrived at the fern wall, she had gone. He sniffed the air. No kit scent, just the bitter smell of Yellowfang's fear. What was she afraid of? Firepaw wondered. Tigerclaw's yowl sounded from the bushes behind the nursery. All the cats raced over to him, headed by Frostfur. They crowded as closely as they could, jostling to see through the dense undergrowth. Firepaw nosed his way forward and saw Tigerclaw standing over a motionless bundle of dappled fur. Spotted Leaf. Firepaw stared in disbelief at her lifeless body. Fury rose in him like a dark cloud, and he felt the blood roaring in his ears. Who had done this? Bluestar stepped through the crowd and leaned over the medicine cat. She has been killed by a warrior blow, she meowed softly. Firepaw craned his neck and saw a single wound on the back of Spotted Leaf's neck. His head swam, and suddenly he was unable to see clearly. Through his grief, Firepaw heard a murmur at the back of the crowd that swelled into a single piercing yowl. Yellowfang is gone!